I'm Adam in Wales, and this is my board gaming vlog, and today I'm looking at 2016, the whole year 2016 and what's been going on. And these games that you've seen around me here, they're not going to feature. That's not because they're not good games. They're probably extremely good games, but I don't suppose I'll ever try them, Star Wars Rebellion aside, because one of my friends will force me to play that because he's a huge Star Wars fan. Shouldn't say force me, I'll be very happy to do so. But generally, guns and explosions and mechanical sort of monsters and all of that, it's not really my bag. So hopefully you're going to find that this sort of top 10 games of 2016 that we're going to look at might be something a little bit different to what you've seen from other channels. That's what I hope, an alternative sort of perspective. Of course, 2016 hasn't just been about the games that have been released. It's been about the experiences, the gaming experiences that I've had, and a lot of my gaming actually this year has, if I was to pick one game that has been kind of the game of the year, the revelation of the year, the game that I've played more than others, it would actually be a game which didn't come out in 2016. It came out in 2015, and it's this one. It's Dr. Eureka. Dr. Eureka is a game with these little test tubes full of little coloured balls that roll around, and you've got to solve a puzzle as quickly as possible before the other players by tipping the test tubes over and trying to sort of get the right balls in the right combination. Practically everyone I've played this with has ended up buying a copy or saying they're going to, and then coming back to me and saying, I can't find it in Toys R Us. I'm having to educate people on the fact that they might have to look a little further afield if they're going to get some quality games. Now, Dr. Eureka is from Blue Orange Games. Blue Orange Games, I'm fortunate to be able to say that this year I actually managed to sign a contract to get them to publish one of my games. So in 2017, Blue Orange will be releasing my game, as yet untitled. It's another speed game. They're a master of these sort of games, you know, speed sort of matching type games as quickly as possible before the other players. So I'm really looking forward to that coming out. And that's been the other big thing that's happened this year, is I've managed to get 4 games signed for publication. I've got 2 coming out next year, the one with Blue Orange, I've got one coming out with Brain Games, and then the following year I've got one coming out with Libelud, who made Dixit and Mysterium and those games. That's a dice game. And then I also have another game which I'm not allowed to talk about at all, which will come out at some point over the next 18 months with somebody. So 4 games signed, which has been really exciting because it's been a year where I've transitioned from a hobby designer as opposed to a professional designer, and I've started to actually think about making it part of my job, and by no means full-time or anything like that, but actually sort of fitting it into my week and being a bit more disciplined about it, and actually considering it part of my profession, which is great because it justifies why I spend so much money and so much time on all this stuff. This is research. It's not just fun and games anymore, it's research. So that's what's been going on this year for me. I went to Essen, I went to the UK Games Expo, which were fantastic sort of experiences, as always. What else has happened for me? This morning I was interviewed on BBC Radio Wales about board games. There you go, there's the height of fame, isn't it? 5 minutes on BBC Radio Wales. I say this morning, I wasn't interviewed this morning. I was interviewed recently, it was played this morning. So it's been a good year from that perspective. Now, in terms of gaming as a whole, I think we're starting to see that Asmodee thing hit. Asmodee being the massive organisation, a massive company that is consolidating the industry, picking up all the main titles, buying and bringing them into their family. And if you'll know, old mass market games like Monopoly and Cluedo churn out multiple editions of the same game, just with different themes. I think we're starting to see that within the hobby industry now. So we've had 2 new versions of Pandemic this year, Pandemic Cthulhu and Pandemic Iberia. We've had a new Carcassonne, Carcassonne Amazonas. We seem to have a new Carcassonne every year. We've had 2 new versions of Ticket to Ride, a beginner's version and Ticket to Ride Rails and Sails. And I think these are going to start to incorporate IPs as we go over time. So, last year we had Carcassonne Star Wars and Quirkle Star Wars. And I think this is going to be more frequent. I would not be at all surprised to see a Codenames Star Wars at some point over the next couple of years. We've had 2 new versions of Codenames this year, and that's a relatively new game, but a massive seller. So we've had Codenames Deep Undercover and Codenames Pictures. Now, my game of the year, I already said it's Dr. Eureka, but forget that. That's the game of 2015. My game of this year is Evolution Climate, which is a remake of Evolution. In fact, it's basically Evolution packaged in a box with a new expansion, but it's amazing. I love Evolution. I'm not going to go on about it too much because I've just recently made a whole vlog episode about that series of games, so you can go back and watch that. But Evolution Climate, I think, is the best release of the year. It's gone absolutely under the radar. Not seeing enough buzz about it. There should be far, far more. I don't know what's happened there, why it hasn't really happened, but it really should. I mean, stunning production, beautiful artwork, outstanding gameplay, lots of clever card combinations, wonderful. And also the game Evolution, the beginning, this sort of beginner's version of Evolution, this is a quality game as well. Quite a cutthroat for a sort of introductory game for casual players, but brilliant stuff. A nice evolution of the Evolution system. Something similar that we've seen with Agricola, another of my very favourite games, is Agricola Family Edition. So this seems to be a trend. I think this is the publishers cottoning on to the fact that, you know, complex strategy games are fantastic and the artistry in them is amazing, and the hobby players, they're going to love them. But if we're going to sell in large quantities, and that's starting to look like a possibility as these games push out into the mass market stores, then we need to make them as accessible as possible and as unintimidating as possible. And that's not only where the money is, but that's where we can also attract in newcomers into this hobby. And there are millions, billions of video game players out there who aren't yet playing board games, and they're all potential board game players. So yeah, we've probably got too many board games coming out at this point. We haven't got enough players for all those games, and the quality can't be, you know, universally high when we have thousands of games coming out each year. But there are players out there who we've yet to access, and I think the publishers are starting to find inroads into getting those people playing games. Only recently I was sat in the pub, you know, and I overheard this conversation going on between this couple, and they were talking about chickens initially, and then they were talking about bread, and then they started talking about contraband, and they're talking about Sheriff of Nottingham, the board game Sheriff of Nottingham. It's fantastic to just wander past somebody, you know, not in a board game cafe, and they're just chatting about some, you know, to the masses, some obscure board game they never will have heard of. But to us, that's hugely significant. So I think there's a real move in that direction, which is great. Other remakes, Shot and Totten, the remake of Battle Line. It was originally called Shot and Totten. This is an old Reiner Knizia 2-player game. And another Reiner Knizia game, Fruit Spy, I particularly enjoyed. This is by Jolly Thinkers. I always like their sort of artwork. They've done 3 games like this: Pick a Pig and Pick a Dog, and Pick a Polar Bear and Pick a Seal. That's a whole series of games. And then Bucket King 3D, and now this one. Really good little game. Not going to make my top 10 because it's so small and fairly insubstantial, but that's a remake of an old game called Dead Man's Treasure by Reiner Knizia. So, let's get on to the top 10 games of 2016 in my view. And as I said, you're not going to see Scythe, you're not going to see Rebellion, you're not going to see Adrenaline, you're not going to see Mechs vs. Minions. But you are going to see some great games and some good games. So number 10 on the list is a game by Bruno Cathala and Christian Martinez, and it's not the final game that you'll see by Bruno Cathala. This is a game called Histrio, and it's by Bombix, and they always do stunning production values, lovely artwork and that sort of thing. It's got this great theatre theme. In Histrio, players attempt to put on a show to impress the king, but his mood is changeable, so he might want tragedy or he might want comedy. Throughout the game, players can manipulate their strength in each different type of drama and manipulate the king's mood to maximise their own points. At the start of a turn, all players simultaneously choose a card which indicates the location they'll be visiting. They play this card face down and they're all revealed together. If the player is alone in visiting a city, then they gain cards and bonuses which are located there. But if multiple players have chosen the same city, then no one gets the cards or bonuses, and the king's mood changes depending on the cards that were at that location. The players who went to the space then receive a secret objective each, which is going to score them points if it's fulfilled at the end of the round. At the end of the game, it will be determined whether the king ultimately wants comedy or tragedy, and players score points for each actor matching the king's preferred drama type.
Players also score points for their completed objectives, and the highest scorer wins.
So this is a simultaneous action selection game. If you're thinking along the lines of Libertalia and Citadels, and even in the simplest version, something like Get Bit, then you'd be on the right tracks. However, this, Histrio, is not the pinnacle of that genre. I think that accolade probably does go to Libertalia. And actually, last year there was that wonderful game Broom Service by Alexander Pfister and Andreas Pelikan, which really pushed that style of game forward and introduced an added bit of sort of push your luck, sort of bravery mechanisms where you can play it safe or you can push that little bit further. Wonderful, wonderful game. Now, Histrio doesn't really develop the genre in those senses. Bruno Catala's been playing with this genre a little bit recently, so we had the game Raptor fairly recently, and the game Haru Ichiban, an abstract game, which both had this idea of you're playing cards or tiles, and if you get the same as the other player, you both choose the same thing at the same time, then something happens. And that's the same in Histrio. That comes with inherent frustrations, and Histrio does have a bit of that going on. But although the gameplay in Histrio is only good, the production is amazing. It looks fantastic. And I love that theatre theme. You know, the recent game Shakespeare, which apparently was a really, really good game, but there was something about that turned me off. The mechanisms all seemed fairly dry, and I don't know, it didn't appeal. But this one does, with those wonderful animal artwork and that lovely 3D stage and the little pieces that you place and the beautiful pictures of cities. I mean, Bombix has gone all out with this one. And yet, it's completely flown under the radar. No one's talking about it. It's well worth a look. See if you can find yourself a copy. Number 9 is Honshu. Now, Honshu it calls itself a trick-taking game, but it's not really. It's a trick-taking game in the same sense that the game Piemalb Flaumen is a trick-taking game. And the clue there is it's not a trick-taking game. Piemalb Flaumen is a sort of auction game with set collection aspects to it, and it's similar to trick-taking. Same thing is true in Honshu. We've got an aspect of card drafting, which results in us getting cards that we use to build a city, tile-laying sort of stuff.
In Honshu, players each have a hand of 6 numbered cards, which also feature a grid of 6 city-building icons: forests, towns, production squares, factories, lakes and fallows. Players take turns to play cards into the centre of the table, and once each player has played one card, the player who played the highest numbered card selects one of the played cards to add to their own personal city. The next highest numbered card, that player selects second and takes a card, and so on until all the cards have been taken. After several rounds, players will have built a city from all the cards they've taken throughout the game, and at the end of the game these cities are scored. Each forest will score 2 points, and the player's largest town, that scores 1 point per town square. Any cubes from production facilities, they get moved onto factories and they score, and the lakes will score when they're all grouped together. And at the end of the game, the highest scorer wins.
Now, the tile laying here is intriguing. It's neat little decisions about, do I put that there or do I put it there? Is that going to block me later? Can I collect that set? And there's aspects of the trick-taking phase which allow you to prevent you from taking allow you to stop other players from taking the cards that they want. So I'm not doing down the drafting phase, and it's sort of like trick-taking. But it doesn't matter. If you enjoy trick-taking games, and if you enjoy drafting games, and if you enjoy set collection and tiling, this is a simple, cheap, attractive package. It's a good game. Very good. Number 8 is another Bruno Catala game, and this time it's Game of Thrones Hand of the King. Now, this is about as far as I would want to go in delving into that Game of Thrones theme in board games. Normally, this is a theme that's handled in a fairly heavy way by Fantasy Flight, so lots of quite busy sort of dark artwork and lots of flavour text and all this sort of stuff is Fantasy Flight's. That's their sort of modus operandum. Here, we've got a really light touch. We've got some beautiful cartoony sort of artwork and a sort of humorous implementation of the theme with subtle sort of clever little funny references, but essentially just a solid Bruno Catala abstract card game.
In Hand of the King, a 6x6 grid is formed representing characters from Game of Thrones. On the player's turn, they move Varys in a straight line, left, right, up or down, and collect the card they land on, plus any others they've passed over which belong to the same family as that card. As soon as a player has more members of a family than anyone else, or indeed if they tie for the most, then they claim that family's banner. And at the game end, the player with the most banners wins. Different families have different numbers of family members as indicated by the number on the card, and when the last one is taken of any particular family, then the player gains a one-off use of a special action card from a separate display. These tend to have neat ways of manipulating the various displays with clever references to the Game of Thrones books and TV series.
Number 7 is Animals on Board by Stronghold Games. Now, Animals on Board has this fantastic sort of silly story about Noah and Noah taking out a sort of copyright or patent or something like that on pairs of animals. So other people who are collecting animals, they can have one animal or they can have 3 or more animals of one type, but they cannot have a pair. And it's just a great starting point for a game.
In Animals on Board, each player has a cardboard arc, and throughout the game it's going to be filled with animal tiles. At game end, each single animal, without any companions of its own species, is worth the number of points indicated on the tile from 1 to 5. Each herd of 3 or more matching animals is worth 5 points per tile, irrespective of what the number is written on that tile. But exact pairs of matching animals, just the 2 of them, these are all discarded before scoring occurs. On a player's turn, the player may split the central group of animals in the display any way they wish and earn 1 food crate. Or the player may take one animal group onto their arc, paying 1 food crate per tile in the group. Each player may only do this 1 time per round, and when all players have taken animals, new ones are placed into the display and a new round commences. Once one player has 10 or more animals in their arc, then the game ends and the highest points wins.
This one really should be a staple. I mean, it's such a simple mechanism. I split, you choose. It's a fantastic mechanism, really, really fun, and not enough games use it. And this game uses it in a really simple way. Essentially, it could be a card game. We could just have a hand of cards, but Stronghold's gone the extra mile and made everything out of cardboard and tiles and things like that, which adds to the theme. You could call it overproduced, but it's still really cheap, and it means it comes in a bigger box and all of that, but it looks great on the table. So I can't fault them on it. I don't understand why it's kind of disappeared towards the end of the year. At the beginning of the year, there was a little bit of buzz around it, and then it completely sort of disappeared as far as I can tell. I didn't see it at Essen at all. So I hope it sticks around and we see more of it. It's a really, really good, simple, introductory game. Number 6 is another Bruno Cathala game, this time Bruno Cathala and Charles Chevalier, who made Abyss. And Abyss is one of my favourite games. I love the game Abyss. Where is it? It's hidden down there somewhere. So Abyss, stunning game. Kanagawa is something a little simpler, if you think along the lines of Coloretto, something like that, where you can either add a card to the selection or you can take all the cards that have already been placed in a particular row or column, for example. It's in that sort of genre of games, although this is a step up in complexity from Coloretto, where Coloretto could be played by anybody, including quite small children. Kanagawa is probably a degree of complexity above what the average sort of newcomer to modern board games could handle. It's by no means complex, but it's got some sophistication to it.
In Kanagawa, players represent artists in 19th century Tokyo. On a player's turn, they place cards onto a central board. They can then either take a column of 1, 2 or 3 cards from the board, or pass and wait to take a fuller column in a later round. Of course, this might mean missing a valuable card if another player snaps it up on their turn. Cards are added to your own personal tableau, and they have 2 uses. A player can either add a card as a painting or as an ability, enabling the player to take more productive turns in future. And at the end of the game, players score points for sets of matching cards and various other set collection bonuses based on the lovely pictures on these cards.
Now, the thing that drew me in this game, apart from the combination of Bruno Cathala and Charles Chevalier, was the stunning artwork. I mean, it looked amazing when I saw these images of that box cover on Board Game Geek. When I actually saw the game in Essen, I was a little disappointed with the size of it. We're talking a small box here, and this stunning cover, well, that's fine, you can see that quite nicely, but once we get into the cards themselves, they're really small, and half of them is taken up by the more functional part of the sort of iconography, which means that our beautiful picture, and it is beautiful, is really tiny. So that's kind of a shame, but then the gameplay isn't really complex or meaty enough to warrant a big box sort of release. It's a minor grumble, because this is a fantastic little set collection sort of game. Well worth a look. Number 5 is a game that I've recently done a review of, and that's Dream Home. Now, Dream Home, I think, will stick around for a while because this is super accessible. It's a game about building your dream home. In Dream Home, each player starts with an empty house containing 12 room spaces. On each of the 12 rounds of the game, every player will add 1 room card to their house following certain restrictions. You must build from the bottom up. Only turquoise cards can be placed on the ground floor, etc. Each room is worth points, but these points increase if they're located next to a similar room type, or another sort of complementary room, such as adding a dressing room next to a bedroom. On a player's turn, they select a room card from a common display. In addition to that card, they'll also receive a resource card, which will give them different actions they can do, such as swapping cards or moving rooms, or new scoring opportunities, or roof cards. And players attempt to collect 4 roof cards throughout the game to complete their roof, and is worth even more points if the roof cards all match in colour. Alternatively, a player may choose to select the 1 room card which is not paired with a resource, and instead becomes start player for the next round. When all players have selected a pair of cards, the round ends and new cards are laid out. The process repeats until the houses are full. Throughout the game, cards might allow players to add items of decor to their homes, perhaps a hot tub in the bathroom or a piano in the living room. These are worth bonus points at the game end. Now, when I think of my dream home, I suppose I'm thinking of something with, swimming pools and cinema rooms, and maybe we could go really lavish and have like a tower with some turrets and I don't know. You can imagine all sorts of things, can't you, in your dream home? Here, the most of the game is thinking, I'd really like a bedroom, and if I could have a kitchen as well, that would be good, and two bathrooms. Well, now I'm really pushing the boat out. If you could have a study or a garage. This is really down to earth dream home sort of stuff, and yet that makes it really accessible. Everybody can engage with this. Everybody understands what's going on, and the drafting is super simple, really easy stuff. And yet there's some neat little decisions and some mean decisions to make, stealing cards off, which other players want, and then there's that little bit, a slight aspect of positional stuff about where you can put the cards, which just lifts the game that bit. The amazing artwork really, really helps. The whole thing's fantastic. I think this is a quality product, and I hope they release expansions for it. I think this one could stick around as an introductory game for years to come. Number 4, another game that I think is going to stick around, or I really hope so, is Hanamikoji. Now, Hanamikoji is a 2-player, small card game with beautiful artwork.
In the 2-player game Hanamikoji, a row of 7 geishas sits between the players, and each player has 4 available actions and 6 item cards. They must use all of their 4 actions once each in any given round, in an attempt to claim the most geishas from the central row. A player starts their turn by drawing a card. The first action available is to place one of your hand cards face down, saving it for scoring at the end of the round. The second action involves hiding 2 cards face down, eliminating them from scoring. The third action involves playing 3 of your cards face up. Your opponent then chooses one of these cards to position on their side of the geisha display, and the current player then places the remaining 2 cards. The fourth action involves playing 4 cards face up, divided into 2 sets as you wish. Your opponent places first one of the sets, and you place the other set. At the end of the round, the total points allocated by a player to each geisha are counted. The player who allocated the highest value of item cards wins the geisha. The geishas have different values between 2 and 5, and a player wins if at the end of a round they have won 11 points worth of geishas, or 4 geishas regardless of their points value.
Over the last, 10, 15 years, every time anyone ever asks on the internet, what would be a really good 2-player game for me and my partner to play? My partner maybe doesn't play that many games, but they'd like to play a game sort of late in the evening, just a short game, simple rules. Always the suggestions are Lost Cities and this one, Shotten Totten, or in its previous edition, Battle Line, and Jaipur. Now, Hanamikoji is as good as those 3 games, and that is to say that it is very, very good indeed as a 2-player game. It's simple, it's beautiful, it's similar in a lot of ways to Shotten Totten or Battle Line, but it's even simpler, and yet the strategy and the tactical sort of depth of it is on a par, perhaps even more so than that game. Stunning card game. I think this one deserves to be on everybody's shelf. Really, really good. I think it's going to be a classic. Number 3 on the list, I'm calling Hit Z Road, because I'm English and the designer is Martin Wallace and he's English, so it couldn't possibly be Hit Z Road, even though that makes a bit more sense. So we're going with Hit Z Road. Now, Hit Z Road is a zombie game, and it's my first zombie game. It's the first zombie game I've got in my collection. I hesitate to say it's my first zombie game in terms of everybody's first introductory zombie game, because that probably goes to Zombie Dice, although I would say skip that step and get yourself Hit Z Road.
In Hit Z Road, players attempt to survive 8 rounds of a zombie apocalypse. Each round, several paths are revealed, made up of 2 adventure cards each. Players take turns to bid resources in a simple auction. The winner gets first choice of which path their survivors are going to follow, and each path can only be taken by 1 player. When players follow a path, they're going to gain resources as shown on the card, they'll resolve any events indicated, and fight zombies, which basically constitutes a fun little mini-game whereby players roll and re-roll dice, initially shooting zombies from a distance and then fighting hand-to-hand. The deck is stacked, so the difficulty increases throughout the 8 rounds of the game, and at game end, any players that survive add up their victory points, and the highest scorer wins.
Now, this is not an auction game. I've heard people sort of, I don't really want a zombie auction game. No, the auction is something and nothing. This is a dice chucker. We're throwing dice, we're killing zombie meeples, and here they're little wooden zombie meeples. So this tells us this is a serious, proper game for board game connoisseurs. None of those plastic miniatures. This is little wooden zombies that we can push over and they'll go click when they fall over. They won't sort of teeter back and forth on a little plastic base. So proper game, Hit Z Road. And here we've got a board game within a board game. Now, I used to work in the theatre, and I was familiar with games, with plays that were a play within a play. Shakespeare did a lot. Here we've got a board game within a board game. So we've got this sort of conceit that this is a game that a kid has repurposed during the zombie apocalypse, repurposed from an old board game. And on the back of the box we've even got the rules of the original game, the game being called Hit the Road, the travel game, repurposed to the My Zombie game. This is Martin Wallace, who makes serious, substantial economic games like Steam and Age of Steam and Railways of the World, but it seems to have taken a step away from that recently to make lighter sort of fare, and Hit Z Road is an excellent example. Yeah, it's got a bit of a runaway leader problem, and it's very, very random, and it's got player elimination in it, but it's so silly and just fun, and the artwork is incredible, and all those little repurposed bottle caps and car keys and Dixit cards and Ticket to Ride cards. I mean, this is just, it's so atmospheric. I absolutely love it. I think it's just silly fun. Number 2 on the list. Now, this is from early in the year, and actually it was a Spiel des Jahres nominee. I think it should have won. It's Emotep by Phil Walker Harding. Now, I should have mentioned earlier on Sushi Go Party, which is a remake of Sushi Go, but with additional cards. I mentioned about people remaking those real big sellers. They're getting lots of remakes. Well, Sushi Go is another one that's sold an awful lot in its original edition. Now we've got Sushi Go Party. Phil Walker Harding, the designer of Sushi Go, made this other set collection game. Very, very simple as well, but with lovely tactile wooden pieces that you can stack to make pyramids, and yeah, wonderful game.
In Emotep, players attempt to score points by building Egyptian monuments, pyramids, temples, burial chambers and obelisks. On a player's turn, they may add blocks to their supply, move a block from their supply to a ship, or move a ship to a site and contribute to the building. Some sites offer special action cards, some offer in-game scoring, others offer end-game scoring for majorities, but each site has a unique mechanism for its scoring, and the game offers a selection of variable boards which you can mix and match to shake up your experience over multiple plays.
So Emotep is a great big box sort of introductory game for new gamers and also for other people who want just a little bit of lighter sort of fare. And that is also true of my number one game of the year, which is another Martin Wallace game, Via Nebula. Now, Via Nebula, again, under the radar, not many people talking about it, and yet it's amazing. It's so attractive. This could be a Days of Wonder game. Well, I suppose it's Space Cowboys and they're all owned by Asmodee now. But it looks very much like that. I mean, this really should be leaping out at people.
In Via Nebula, players attempt to clear the fog from a misty landscape, creating routes to deliver resources to key locations. Exploiting these resources allows players to build buildings which generate special actions and victory points. On a player's turn, they may place craftsmen, generating resources, place building sites, explore fog spaces, creating routes for delivery, transport resources down these routes, or construct buildings. Often, players will be forced to take actions which will also be beneficial for their opponents, hence interaction is high in the game. And when a player has constructed their fifth building, the game ends and the highest points win.
This is essentially Steam, the Family Edition, like the Agricola Family Edition. What we've got here is the basic mechanisms of Steam, that sort of pick up and deliver stuff, simplified to their very basics, and yet it's retained lots of sort of strategic choices and tactical choices, and they've just added in this beautiful artwork, and the number of actions you can take on your turn has been pulled back to the absolute minimum, and yet it's retained. I mean, I didn't enjoy Steam all that much. I sort of admired it and respected its mechanisms, but it was too heavy for me. This has taken all that's good from Steam and compacted it into a neat little, fun, accessible version without all the intimidation of that stuff. Wonderful, wonderful game, Via Nebula. More people should be playing this. I suspect it's going to disappear because, well, I'm not hearing anything about it, which is a shame. So, that is 2016. Of course, the other thing that happened in 2016 was that I started this vlog. Now, is it a vlog or is it not a vlog? I was asked that this morning by my nephew. I spent Christmas with my nephew and niece, and they've been watching my channel. In fact, they've started calling me, instead of Uncle Adam, I'm now Adam in Wales, pretty much exclusively. Good morning, Adam in Wales. Hi, Uncle Adam. Adam in Wales. Happy Christmas, Adam in Wales. I've had a lot of that this week. But I've also had, your vlog. It's not really a vlog. That's not how a vlog works. You really need to watch some more vlogs, Adam in Wales, because that's not really a vlog. What you're doing is just like, I don't know, videos about board games. It's not a vlog. So I don't know whether this is going to be called a vlog or whether I'm going to continue to call these things vlogs. We'll see. Anyway, what's been great is that I've gained a whole load of subscribers to the channel. I've revived what was an old review channel that I started years ago as Europhile Reviews, which kind of flagged a little bit. But it's been nice to actually talk about design and mechanisms in games and really get into some of the stuff that I'm really fascinated by, and also talk about my own design stuff. And so I'm very grateful to people who watch and people who comment. If you did like the video, please subscribe to my channel, Adam's Board Game Wales, and follow me on Twitter @BoardGameWales. On Board Game Geek, I'm Adam78. So thank you very much for watching. Happy Christmas, Happy New Year, and I'll see you in 2017.